What's going on, folks, and welcome back to the Shores of Eternum. Just recently, the 2021 Summer Game Fest event began, and it did feature two specific portions that showcased the upcoming new world. One part was shown on Friday, known as the Deep Dive, and the other happened yesterday, which is a video that gave us a 101 on expeditions. Now, both of these portions didn't reveal hardly anything for people that already followed the game. The first one especially was a general overview for getting some new eyeballs, and just giving people a basic gist of what New World is all about. Now, like I mentioned during the stream, because we did do a live reaction, I did stream last year's PC game event for New World 2, and it was pretty much the same. We talked and did a Q&A for a few hours, and then it ended up being the 2-minute Combat Unleashed trailer that didn't reveal much of anything other than offhand wielding torches and the Void Destroyer. So for me, I wasn't really surprised this happened, but I do agree that it probably shouldn't have been called Deep Dive, because I think it gave a false sense of priority and probably raised expectations far greater than they needed to be. That being said, there's not a lot to break down for either of the events, but here's all the details we did pull, starting with the Deep Dive. It starts off with showing us some footage from previous media we've already seen, some shots of the landscape and Outpost Rush, showing us the storm that surrounds the island of Eternum along with the moment we wash up, and then we get some footage of the previous trailer they showed us, followed by Scott Lane, the game director, giving us a brief introduction to the new description of the lore. One of the main things he said is that in the past century, the pendulum has swung in favor of the corrupted with the rise of the Tempest. And the Tempest is described as the architect of an apocalypse that seeks to unmake life here and target the old world next. Now, if you haven't been following the lore, and I'm gonna go off the rails a little bit, as time progressed, there's been quite a few things added to previously established story, and some things have been tweaked or renamed or completely remade. And they've done things like this in an effort to improve the storytelling experience and build a better world overall. And this is something we talked about in the conversation I had directly with them a while ago. Previously, in the May update, we were introduced to the expedition known as the Depths. This expedition features a boss known as Captain Thorpe. This is the man we sailed to Eternum with, and shortly after we arrived, he was tainted by the corruption and does play a part in the story as one of the villains. Even beforehand, he appeared as a mini-boss in Mirkgard of Shattered Mountain, and now he's playing a bigger part in the storyline. The part to take from this is that in the May update, the description says he's describing himself as the Master of the Tempest, the King of Corruption, but just below that, in his actual description, it describes him as an agent. Now, both that and what Scott said seem to directly conflict, because when he said the Tempest is rising, he described it as the architect of an apocalypse, as if it's a person or entity all on its own. So people were starting to theorize that Captain Thorpe himself is the Tempest. I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's the case. First thing is that in the conversation I had with Amazon Games, one of the things they told me they also did with the story and wanted to see if I recognized it is that sometimes when we're reading these lore pages or quest dialogue, it can often be one-sided or have a degree of deception behind it. Just like with real history, sometimes it didn't exactly happen the way it was written down. And if we look at the other characters, specifically the villains, both Isabella and the Empress arrived here far before us or Captain Thorpe did. And now with Isabella, I can't talk about it, but I know her story from start to finish. And she's also now featured in the Dynasty expedition that's almost 10 levels above the expedition we fight Thorpe in. And I wish I could reveal more about that experience, but Isabella, in my opinion, is more powerful than Captain Thorpe, even in his mini-boss form, by a long shot. And just like we theorized in the past, none of these characters are the true god of the corrupted. Not even close. If Captain Thorpe were to be considered as such, it would end up being a plot hole and conflict with other parts of the lore that I can't go into. But if he's being used by the so-called god or source of corruption, or he's a frontman like Steppenwolf is to Darkseid or Sauron to Morgoth, that would make sense. And I think Amazon has been doing a good job of throwing people for a loop and shrouding the story in mystery. One thing I think I can say is the storm that's located around the island is not currently referred to as the Tempest, it's called the Storm Wall. The Tempest could be the source of power that the corruption pulls from, or it could be the true name of the Dark God himself. That part we'll have to find out, but neither Thorpe, Isabella, or the Empress are characters I would even consider close to being the Master of Corruption. I know the name of the most prime suspect, and I can't wait to share more, but just think about this. The Empress was corrupted by an unknown agent, Captain Thorpe was sent here by Father Russo, and just fell over dead to fall to the corruption itself, but who do you think corrupted Isabella? And on the old world side, we now know that they probably won't be thinking about a naval system for a little while, but lore-wise it would eventually make sense for it to happen. We know through previous pages of lore that the corrupted are getting more and more sophisticated. Isabella as one of the agents is not only pretty powerful, but pretty intelligent as well. She's cunning, she can be persuasive as we've seen in previous stories. I think eventually from a story perspective, whatever's going on here is going to get off this island. And then at that point, it would be really cool if we had to travel to the old world and fight portions of the apocalypse there too. There's a lot of potential there. Now for the rest of the deep dive, it's pretty simplistic. We got some new footage of some of the expeditions like Dynasty Shipyard, beautiful environment here, and it's one of my favorite ones that I cannot wait to talk more about once the NDA drops. Garden of Genesis is briefly showcased right after, with the boss fight of Taxodius being the primary focus. This expedition is focused on the Angry Earth. These expeditions at endgame will have a degree of difficulty to them on the mechanic side, especially in the Lazarus expedition for the last boss. You need to be ready to DPS for your life on this guy. And the next thing is just a few more snippets of the new regions, starting with a few frames of Ebonscale Reach. Next to Morningdale, this is probably one of my new favorite zones because I've always loved the aesthetic of the culture this place pulls from. Reekwater is right after that just to get a better look at the environment, but we've already seen some of this and explored it quite a bit during the Reekwater special event that was hosted last year. And this gets followed up by a showcase of some of the main villains in New World. Starts off with Isabella and how they describe her as one of the more powerful ones, which I can absolutely attest to, and I really hope it stays that way. Then we also get a better look at the Siren Queen, who's featured in her very own arena. I love the design of her, and I actually just got some artwork done for her character, and a fantasy Viking design that ironically comes from Elder Scrolls Online. He was the coolest Viking concept I could find, so that's why he's in there. Following that, we get an in-game look at the Empress of Ebonscale Reach. She's featured with her magic orb inside the expedition that still has some lingering questions behind it. It seems to absolutely be a construct of magical nature, and one of the things I was recently asked about is if this orb could be similar to the ones that are always showcased in ancient statues. This is actually very possible because that very same gem that's located in Isabella's amulet is similar to the one located in the forehead of Chardas. So whatever energy is powering up these trinkets of theirs, it does stand to reason that it could have been from whatever the ancients were doing. For the rest of the deep dive, it's basically just a rundown on the enemy families of New World and the weapons. So they talk a bit about the ancients, the corrupted, the angry earth, and the lost, and then they talk a little bit about how the weapon system operates. They also do a Q&A after this, but like I said, it's pretty much just a general overview of the game and doesn't really reveal any new information. The Expedition 101 came the day after and was also followed up by a Q&A, but we only need to really focus on the expedition side for now. They started off by giving a basic introduction to them, their 5-player dungeons that will feature unique enemies, expansions on the lore itself, and even puzzles that we'll come across that we'll have to solve, like this glyph puzzle room they showcase later in the Lazarus expedition. So for this one, we'll have to step on the symbols in the exact order it shows on the wall. We've also seen other types of puzzles like in the Shattered Obelisk where we'd have multiple walls of purple beams. One of the things they also show here is some of the loot we'll be coming across. We can see that we'll have a chance of getting a piece like the 600 gear score Ice Gauntlet, which recently the gear score was lowered to 600, so this would be considered a max quality item. Then they show a bow of 550 gear score that also has some custom perks of its own. And one that I really like is the Keenly Jagged one. Whenever we get a critical strike, we apply a bleed that lasts 10 seconds and deals 7% weapon damage. That could be pretty good for having a bow build. We also get a better look at some of the new gear sets they added. With this one on the far left that looks like it originates from content related to the Dryads, and this one in the middle being my favorite. Looks more like it's tied to a corrupted nature. And they still have a lot planned on the gear side like we found out before, plus we're able to dye these pieces. So for me personally, I would love to have this armor in all black. And during the expedition, they of course go over how New World features more of a trinity system, with characters being able to specifically build for tank, DPS, or healer. They describe the Lazarus expedition as a place where we can discover more about the history of Aeternum, the secrets of the island, the true nature of Azoth, and the truth about what happened to the ancients. Accordingly, this expedition is completely filled with ancient guardians, and they even showcase the bosses, starting with Scylla, who appears to be some kind of constructed Gorgon, and also Chardas, described as a colossal ancient construct that stands guard over the Lazarus Well. And fun fact, in a previous lore video, we went over how both Scylla and Chardas seem to be more of a play on Scylla and Charybdis from the Odyssey. And over time, we've seen other hints at Greek mythology throughout the lore of New World to further support them doing things like this. And that might just give hints on where the story could go. But that's about everything that was showcased during both of these events that I wanted to go over. It's not really anything brand new, but if you're still not up to date on the game or you just started following it recently, I can recommend checking it out just to get a better look of what the game is like. But for me, I'm going to call it there, but thank you so much for joining me for this quick update. Have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.